Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your popper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Oh, yeah, I think you know.
Is it good?
Yeah.
I just really hope one of these weeks our canned banter is just disrupted by you going, actually, it was awful. Not that
well,
I would.
Dude, actually, it's been a hard week. I don't know if our listeners know, but I'm in the middle of remodeling a duplex right now. And it is, dude, Chip and Joanna, they make it look so easy on their show. And it's not that easy. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress. And it's sort of one of those things where now the light's at the end of the tunnel, but there are days where I was just like, what have I gotten myself into? But, we're maybe like 2 weeks away from moving into that unit, out of my brother's unit. He and I bought the duplex together. So really things are going well, but it's been a very tough couple weeks for me.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm still unpacking crap from my move, and, I'm still getting used to the 9 to 5 gig again, and from going from freelance. So, we've been pretty busy.
I miss talking to you. We don't talk as much anymore.
We don't, because I'm at work now instead of like quote unquote at work where, I'm sitting at home in my bed building a website. Now I actually have to go in and, wear clothes and all those other, responsible things
that the man makes you do.
Yeah. I did have to go out and buy a bunch of dress shirts as well so that I can look nice, but, we're diverging.
Dress shirts won't make you. I'm just kidding. Anyway, what are we talking about this week?
First up, we got a deck tech that, we briefly touched upon and we're coming back to. It's, Blue-Red Blitz, Delver Fiend, Eye Candy. There have been so many names for this list over the years. And
Eye Candy, I've heard of that. What is the origin of the name Eye Candy?
The Cyclops. It has one big eye. I don't know the candy part, but...
Yeah, all right. Tricks this ain't.
Yeah. But anyway, Blue-Red Blitz is, it's a deck comprised of a lot of cards that probably shouldn't exist, and they all work well together. It leverages a lot of free spells. It leverages a lot of, spells matter cards, not necessarily prowess, but like the kind of the mega prowess effects.
Right, the quasi prowess before prowess, because both Kiln Fiend and Ivic Cyclops were printed before that ability.
Yeah. As a side note, I really like prowess as an evergreen ability now because I feel like it's a very good ability, and in the future, I am hoping that we get like a really solvable, playable prowess card for Pauper because I think it could happen.
Yeah, also keep dreaming those big dreams, Mike.
On that note, though, has anything from either Revolt seen play?
I don't know. Maybe.
I think it's. I think I saw something saying that like one of the implements saw play in a burn list, but
I don't know. They're just. I just don't know if that set was very deep for the format. I certainly can't think of anything off the top of my head here. Could be totally wrong. I'm sure people are playing cards out of it. Whether those lists are 5-0ing and I'm seeing them on Integer Goldfish is another matter, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. But let's get into the list. We've got, starting off the top of the list, 4 copies Delver of Secrets. It's a 1/1 for blue. Beginning of your upkeep, you may look at the top card of your library. You may choose to reveal it. If you reveal it and it is an instant or sorcery, transform this card. The backside of it is a flying 3/2. And
I mean, this is a good card, and we're playing a Spells Matter deck, so
yeah, and this is also like, I feel like this has to be the iconic creature for this format. Just, it's real good. Nothing else much to say. Next, we got Kiln Fiend, which is 1 and a red for a 1/2, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +3/+0 until end of turn. And then we have its kind of weird 2-color sibling, Nivik Cyclops, which is 1, a blue, and a red for an 0/4? Or
with Defender. It might be a 1/4.
Yeah, it's a 1/4 with Defender. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, it's +3/+0 until end of turn and loses Defender.
Right.
So both of these guys get real big real quickly.
And yeah, you sort of churn through your deck, and then you're trying to one turn kill your opponent in like one big shot.
Yeah, you're kind of hoping to like, find a way to either get evasive or hope that your opponent doesn't build out a board position quickly and just sucker
Here's
punch
a fun
them.
fact.
Yeah.
Abrupt Decay has a decaying Nivix Cyclops on it, for those of you who do not know.
It does, and it can hit Nivix Cyclops, although I can almost guarantee that is not a majority of its targets over the course of its life.
Correct, but it does that.
So moving into our spells, I'm going to start with the free stuff or the cost cheating stuff, because this is kind of the part of the deck that makes it tick. 4 copies of Gataxian Probe. So it's a blue Phyrexian mana, so it's almost always played for 2 life instead of the blue mana. And all it says is look at your opponent's hand, draw a card. So it procs your Fiend and your Cyclops and gives you a new card, and it doesn't cost you any mana.
And now it's banned in Modern.
What was the actual justification for that? Because I never really saw it.
It was basically just that it was too good and let decks cheat mana and look at hands and have perfect information and then cycled. But yeah, basically it was just it's too strong. Sort of like the Ponder Preordain problem of blue cantrips.
Okay, well,
I don't really know. I don't play a lot of Modern, but that was the justification.
Next on the list, we've got Mutagenic Growth, which is a green Phyrexian, so it's always 2 life in this deck, because there are no green sources. And this one just gives a creature +2/+2 until end of turn. Except in this list, it's most often going to wind up working out to somewhere closer to +5/+2.
Yeah, it's going to be big.
Yeah. This also notably puts all of your threats that were susceptible to Lightning Bolt out of Lightning Bolt range.
Right.
But mainly it's just the fact that it's a free spell that is 2 life in exchange for 5 damage is absurd.
Yeah, it's strong.
Yeah. Then we got, if we're going in order of strictly free spells, Gush. Gush has a mana cost. It doesn't matter, because I think I have seen this cast for its mana cost, I think, once in my life. It costs 4 and a blue, but Gush says you can return 2 islands to your hand instead of paying its mana cost. Draw 2 cards.
So so the idea is you float 2 blue mana, you Gush, you draw 2 new cards, and then you're able to keep going on your Nivix Cyclops gravy train and hopefully just blow out your opponent by doing 20 damage in 1 turn.
Yeah, this is because this is kind of the sibling spell to Daze, right? Because this was a mechanic in the Masks block, or at least the first 2 sets of Masks block, was every color kind of got a bunch of free spells that all had specific kind of thematic things in common between them. All the green, actually, I think it was just blue returned lands, and then the rest of them were all just kind of weird.
No, there's hold up.
I know they were in all
colors.
colors.
I was gonna say there was unmasked, but unmasked is exiling a black card from your hand, so never mind.
Yeah, there was also misdirection, but I think a good chunk of the blue ones were all returning lands to hand, which, again, is basically free because we don't live in the time of mana burn anymore.
Right.
And even when we did, it was fine to nug yourself for 2 in order to draw 2. But this card's absurd. This is restricted in Vintage for a reason.
Right. Well, the Vintage because of Fast Bond.
Yeah. I mean, also just the fact that in Vintage it's a free, potentially drawn to 2 pieces of power. Right. Always cards and formats get restricted or banned based on, the power of what they do. And with draw spells, it matters what you're drawing into. In the almost free, we've got Apostle's Blessing, which is 1 and a Phyrexian white, so a generic and 2 life. Target creature you control gains protection from the color of your choice or artifacts until end of turn.
Yeah, so this is one of our main getting in spells. Like opponents tapped out, we're getting in. Their blockers don't matter because we're getting in.
It's not even just that it gets, your creatures in. It also like functions as kind of a counterspell.
We're getting in.
I know.
Yeah, it's a counterspell because it functions. It fills the same role as like Vines of Vastwood, minus the fact that you can also kick the creature, or kick the spell. But yeah, it's a great protection spell. If you're the opponent and you're making them waste one of these, then it's really good for you too, though. But yeah, in a pinch, it'll protect your creatures. But ideally, you want to be like attacking, and then before blocks, they try and kill your creature, and you're like, haha, sucker, Apostle's Blessing. Good luck getting rid of this guy.
Yeah. Just again, Phyrexian mana, probably a mistake. They've admitted that. Out of curiosity, just to pick your brain on this, would you feel Phyrexian mana would be a little bit more fair if they just bumped it up to 3 life?
Is it even playable at that point?
See, that's the thing. I'm wondering, like, is 3 life too much and 2 life is too little, and there's no happy medium there?
I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I don't know why they settled on 2. I imagine that was just because 3 was seen as too much. Having hindsight 2020 and all that. I don't know. 3 might be a little too much. Your card would have to be pretty freaking good to also cost 3 life.
Yeah. Moving on to spells where we actually cast them for their mana costs. 4 copies of Lightning Bolt, red instant, deal 3 damage to a creature or player.
Really, if you slice it, it's more like deal 7 or 8 damage, right? If you Nivix Cyclops out unblocked and getting in.
And this can also, double as removal to help you get in because, for example, if you have 2 Nivix Cyclopses and if both of them get in, it's lethal. Sometimes you got to remove a creature instead of just Apostle's Blessing one of them and hoping that one gets the other one doesn't get blocked.
Excuse me. Precisely.
What else do we have here? We got a copy main deck of Dispel, which is a blue for an instant counter target instant spell.
Yeah, that card is strong if you're trying to protect your creatures or get in. Like most of these cards we've gone over so far are instants that you want to do in combat. So yeah, having a 1 mana counter spell is pretty good.
Also lets you play around weird combat tricks or all sorts of stuff. We got 4 copies of Ponder and 4 copies of Preordain. More blue cantrips that are too good for modern. Yeah, you're going to want to be kind of sculpting your hand sometimes in this deck, and why not, go with the stuff that's good enough for Vintage and Legacy?
Well, also they trigger your Kiln Fiend, Nivix Cyclopses, so they help you flip your Delvers. They're just really, very, very strong cards, and there's a reason that this deck is playing 4 copies of each of them. Yeah.
And then the big pickup. So prior to this card being printed, I had seen lists like this running Assault Strobe or other weird options. This card is Temur Battle Rage. This card is absurd.
It's also much better because it's an instant. Assault Strobe's a sorcery.
Oh yeah. So Temur Battle Rage is 1 in a red. Target creature gains double strike, and then it has Ferocious, which was one of the keywords from Khan's block. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, something happens, and in this case, it's that creature gets trample.
Guess what this deck is full of?
Yeah, stuff.
I mean that's any creature except for Delver.
Yeah, because the trigger for casting the spell will resolve first. It always has that second line of text on, and it does reduce it from It makes it so you have to cast 2 other spells in your turn for one of your creatures to be lethal from 20.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely absurd, and, it does mitigate blocks. Maybe your opponent thinks, oh, man, I can just chump this one because they didn't make it unblockable, and I'm okay. And no, you're not, sir. But this card, this is one of those ones that's absurd. Again, also modern playable. Like a lot of these, this I would honestly say this deck probably has one of the highest like percentages of the deck of like cards that are very playable in other formats.
Yeah, I can see that. Except for the creatures, except for Delver. But Killing Fiend, Nivix, Cyclops, you don't really see those in a lot of
Yeah.
Actually, maybe it doesn't Killing Fiend. Is Killing Fiend in that Zoo aggro list or no? Probably not.
I don't know enough about Modern to tell you.
Yeah, that's the problem. We don't know enough about Modern, but don't listen to us.
Land base, we got 3 Evolving Wilds, 2 Swiftwater Cliffs, and 8 islands and 5 mountains. And
but wait, Mike.
Yes.
What about Ash Barrens?
Oh God, are you asking me to explain why Ash Barrens isn't good here?
No, I know. I was just thinking of last week we went over that, so I was just kidding. Don't worry about it.
Putting me on the spot after a hard work week.
Don't worry about it. We talked about it last week.
Moving into the sideboard, 2 copies of Electrickery. Red, deal 1 damage to a creature you don't control. Overload, 1 in a red, deal 1 damage to each creature you don't control. You got to be able to beat elves, I guess, and it's pretty good against mono blue Delver.
Yeah.
2 copies of Gorilla Shaman, the good old Mox Monkey, here to make Affinity's day terrible. 3 Hydroblast, 3 Pyroblast, 1 Flaring Pain, which is the real spice. Flaring Pain is 1 in a red instant. Damage cannot be prevented until end of turn.
And then or this turn, not till end of turn.
Oh, this turn, that's true. Yeah.
And then it has flashback R.
Yeah, this is the way that they managed to get around Circle of Protection red.
Yeah.
And
or
fog
fogs
effects. Then we got 2 copies of Jeskai Sage, which is a 1/1 for 1 in a blue with prowess, and when it dies, you draw a card. And combo that with the next thing on the sideboard list, 2 copies of Stormbound Geist, which is 1 and 2 blue for a 2/2 flyer with Undying that can only block other flyers.
Right. So this deck it only runs 12 creatures. It's very soft to Edict style effects, namely Chainers. So you bring in these creatures if your opponent's playing Chainers Edict, so that you have a little bit more game against that card, and maybe you're not losing your best threat every time. Just you lose your Stormbound Geist and it comes right back, and then they have to deal with that too. So that's the reason those cards are in the sideboard, is just if your opponent is playing a lot of removal.
Also, both of these, in this list can get in for a decent amount of damage. Like, Stormbound Geist is evasive. It comes back as a 3/3 in the air, and Jeskai Sage does have prowess on it. Like, it does benefit from your spells.
Does it? Yeah, it does.
It does.
Objectively does.
In terms of cost, you're looking at 49 and change online and 59 and change in paper.
I mean, that's dirt cheap for a playable Pauper, playable Magic deck. And I would say it's pretty cheap for Pauper too, honestly.
Yeah, for some of the tier 1 decks, it's definitely like some of the Tron variants definitely surpass this in terms of cost. Like Rug Tron is pretty pricey. In terms of application to other lists, there's a lot of good stuff in here, right? Like, you could port this into Mono Blue Delver and not have a whole ton of stuff to pick up, right?
Right. You got a lot of good sideboard cards. Delver itself is a good pickup. Really, I would say one of the best things is that it has Hydroblast and Pyroblast in it, though.
Yeah, those we cannot emphasize this enough, listeners. Please just buy yourself a set of those. Like,
those are some good cards.
Yeah, there's every format has those sideboard cards where there's no real noticeable downside to playing them, and in our format it's those two. Like, blue decks and red decks are always going to show up. But yeah, have you actually played this deck?
Yeah, I have. It's aight. It's not really what I like to play, but it's aight.
Oh, really? You're saying the deck where you get to 1 turn combo kill your opponent isn't your cup of tea?
I just don't play it that often.
I've also played this deck. It's definitely like a lot of fun, and there are some matchups, especially like the grindier, slower matchups where they don't hit their removal to line up with your threats, where it is kind of easy mode. Like, it's very easy to get 20 damage across the board very, very rapidly.
I just like Affinity better. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's fair. You like your artifacts and you like your weird robots. I can't fault you.
My sad robot, my little robot.
Although, if I remember correctly, you don't play Fat Robot, which is the best robot.
I play backed against the wall robot. Some mirror and police other mirror, Mike. I'm just being goofy.
For this week, we got maybe board cards for this this list. And the first kind of class of stuff that we pulled out, and these I've seen these all in various incarnations of this list, are ways to make your guys unblockable. First, we got Shadow Rift, which it's a blue target creature gains shadow until end of turn, draw a card.
Right, and you can use this on your guy. Conversely, you can use it on your opponent's guy if they have one creature. And I don't really know why there's a big difference there, but you could, and then you would draw the card still.
Yeah. Well, you can also target your opponent's creature with it because creatures with shadow can't block creatures without shadow. So if your opponent has one blocker, you hit their thing with this, and you can get through.
But why wouldn't you still just use it on your creature?
If you have two creatures.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I missed that part. All right. Yeah, carry on.
It's a little bit more niche. Next, we have Slip Through Space, which is blue, sorcery, devoid. Target creature can't be blocked this turn, draw a card. And the key bit here is devoid means it is colorless, and you can't pyroblast it.
So does this card just make Shadow Rift obsolete?
I'm going to say no, mainly just because I think that niche
creature.
Yeah, the niche play of I have two things that if both of them get in, I'm good. I like Shadow Rift's utility.
I think that's just so rare in this deck, though. Generally, it's going to be one thing because Teamer Battle Rage makes it so almost all your threats are lethal if you play like you have two spells and then that card. So I don't know. Yeah, I could see it though.
And the last one is Artful Dodge, which is blue, target creatures unblockable, flashback, blue. So it doesn't draw you a card, but it does, in a way, draw you another Artful Dodge.
Right.
Because you get another use out of it.
The only problem with that one is it's a sorcery, which I guess doesn't matter if you're making a creature unblockable. You have to do it before combat anyway.
Or before
the other
blocks,
card I wanted
least.
to talk about.
Yeah?
I thought we were going to put a elusive Spellfist in there.
Yeah, the good old Fisty McGee.
Yeah, no one calls him that, Mike. Anyway,
they do now.
Elusive Spellfist is 1 and a U. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Elusive Spellfist gets +1/+0 until end of this turn, or until end of turn cannot be blocked this turn. So it's a weaker version of some of the existing cards. It is a bit, bigger on the back end than Kiln Fiend. The only reason that I think this card maybe doesn't get played is because the +1/+0 is not as powerful as the cannot be blocked ability. So I don't know, because this card seems like it fits in very well with the deck too, and I could see that if you really didn't like Jeskai Sage, you could play this card instead. Although Jeskai Sage does get its toughness bigger because it actually has prowess, whereas this creature does not have that keyword.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest gripe with Spellfist would be the fact that it does not pass the Bolt test, but a decent chunk of this deck doesn't, and I do want to note that Elusive Spellfist, not in this deck, but in other decks, does care about non-creature spells. So, you could potentially sit down and cook up a little something with this where, it occasionally gets procced off, an artifact or an enchantment or something, right?
Right. And I would argue that, it doesn't pass the Bolt test like on its face, but it never does. It doesn't actually have prowess. I lied. Never mind. Don't listen to me. It only gets its teeth bigger.
Yeah. I mean, not the end of the world though. Like plenty of like Hallmark cards in this format don't pass the Bolt test. It's just,
right.
One of those things you got to be aware of.
You got to think of it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I definitely like Elusive Spellfist. If I remember correctly, because I have like the vaguest knowledge of like Standard Pauper when that was a thing, and I think that this was a deck. Like, is it prowess?
Yeah, it played like Flurry of Horns and some other stuff.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
but let's let's get into our topic for today.
Okay.
Today we want to talk about playing around a card, and I think first let's explain that. Like, okay, if I'm sitting across the table from Adrian and he has an ATOG on the battlefield, I have to kind of consciously play around if he has fling or not, assuming lethal amount of artifacts.
Right, and if you have an ATOG out, you should be playing around fling, and if you're not, well, shame on you. You should never tap out against Affinity once they have ATOG on the battlefield. However,
but
that's not always the case, right?
And the other thing is, on the counterpoint, you with the ATOG on the battlefield, if I'm playing a blue deck, you have to sit there and play around me tapping out if the ATOG fling plan is where you're headed.
Right, because if you leave up 1 blue or even 2 blue mana, I don't know if you have a Dispel or a Hydro Blast or a Counter Spell, you gotta really play around it, and you can't go for it until you're sure, which is why I recommend playing Glasses of Urza. Not just kidding.
To be fair, you did test that variant out for a while.
That card's pretty spicy. It's only 1 mana. You can always have perfect information. It's cool.
Yeah. So playing around something is kind of, this concept of altering your behavior based on something you think your opponent has in hand or know that they have in their deck and might have in hand.
Right.
So it's kind of, like a lot of the times it's supposition. Sometimes, like, for example, if you duress your opponent, you do kind of have a lot of information for the first bit of the game.
Right. And then you get to, axe one of their cards. Always good.
Yeah. And kind of one of the things is, when is this good? When is this bad? Why should this be a skill that we kind of try to work on having?
Well, it's just really important. If you know about the format and you're able to think, oh, UU means counterspell, you won't run out your first threat. You'll be like, maybe I'll try and bait them a little and see if they'll, take this. And if they don't counter that, then you're like, well, maybe I can actually play out my real card after all. And then they, it's just very important to being able to play a format when and then that's how you can also meta game and you can make decisions. And having knowledge of the format and being able to play around things is very important. I do understand that some people get a little bit of analysis paralysis with that. If your opponent has UU and only 1 card in your hand and you have lethal if you play your card, you should go ahead and play your card. And knowing when to identify those situations is just really important to succeeding and winning in the game.
Yeah, there's kind of like the element of like forcing your opponent to have it. Like if you have lethal and you're already ahead on board, like you're not losing next turn if your spell that gives you lethal gets countered, you kind of run it out just because
you just went on the spot. Yeah.
Because the upside there is so good, right? Like just ending the game. And if your opponent has it, you're still in an okay board position,
And sort of the other side of that coin is if you're going to lose the next turn, but if you win, if they don't have an answer, then you might as well run it out, and you lose either way. So you can't afford to play scared. So yeah, it's this very fine balance between being cautious and knowing when to go for it. And it's a skill that's acquired over time as you play more Magic.
Yeah, and definitely, it's format to format dependent because, when we have, for example, if I have a blue and a black up and you're trying to figure out what counter magic I'm on, it's very different from the counter magic I might be on if we were playing modern, where it's likely remand, versus in Pauper, where it could be a remove soul or a prohibit or a negate. Or
right, but I know it's not a counter spell. I know it's not a straight up counter spell.
Exactly,
because you don't have that mana up.
So then it kind of becomes this guessing game of here's the options of what my opponent could have. Which of these outcomes am I okay with? Should I just run this spell into it just to deprive my opponent of that counter? Like it requires a lot of like quick value analysis of like, does running this spell into a counter spell I know they have work out well for me?
Right.
And the same goes for removal as well. Like, sometimes if you have 2 threats, you run out the slightly less important one first. If you put your opponent on having, a Doomblade or something and hoping that they go for it.
Right.
And I think, and feel free to disagree with me, I think one of the cards that, in our format causes the most problems with this is days.
No, let's talk about that because yeah, let's talk about Daze. So Daze is a card that it costs 1 and a blue, and it has an alternate casting cost of return an island to your hand. And if you do that, it basically force spikes your opponent. So they would have to pay 1 or their spell gets countered. A lot of people play around this card. They play way too scared of this card. Daze is really only good the first like 3 turns of the game, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, yes, it rapidly loses quality, and that cost on it is not nothing, right? Because most of the time you're going to be doing it on your opponent's turn, so that land's going to sit in your hand until it comes back to your turn. It does represent a very real tempo loss in some ways.
Right, but being able to snag your opponent's play when they tap out is pretty sweet. I've dazed a few things in my day.
Jokes.
We got him.
So one of the things that I always like to think about is if I'm on the play against an opponent, which I've like quote unquote put him on days. So putting someone on something, for those who are not super aware of lingo, is kind of like, I am almost definite that my opponent has this card somewhere in their 75. And for example, against Delver, if I'm like, all right, I'm willing to bet that this person has days, I'm on the play. A lot of people will tell you, hold your lands back, play them in your second main phase. The important thing here is play that land before you play something if it saves you from getting force spiked. Because
right.
I've definitely seen people run out their 2-drop, it gets dazed, and then watching them put down their 3rd land, and it's like, oh no, you goofed. But yeah, I definitely think like people, and I definitely did this for a long time, get way, way too cautious about days, and it's not mana leak, right? It's not like an actual serious amount of mana. It's just, and you don't want to,
right? It's just 1, and so it feels really bad when you get dazed. So
yeah, it does create a little bit of a feel bad, but at the same time, playing a turn behind because you're worried about your opponent dazing everything is actively hampering you.
Right, and so it goes back again to, do you play scared or do you play around it? I'm of the opinion that you play around it as long as possible. But let's say like turn 2, if you're on the draw and your opponent has the island, or you're on the play and your opponent has the island, and you got to play like a prophetic prism, I would just run out the prophetic prism unless you like absolutely need it for like color fixing. But it's fine to get like 1 thing snagged by the counter spell, and then you don't have to worry about it the rest of the game. You can't. I'm of the opinion that you can't play scared of counter spells unless it's like really obvious they have it. You know what I mean?
And the other thing is, later in the game, if you have, for example, I don't know, 5 mana on the table, and you have a 2 mana spell and a 3 mana spell, and you care more about resolving one of those, and you think your opponent might have days because they're tapped out, and you probably want to slam the one that you care about more first, because if they go for the days, you then get the choice, versus if you play it second and they have the days, the important spell's getting countered.
Right, exactly.
In terms of, and that brings up like the whole topic of sequencing and like ideal orders in which to play your cards. And that's a whole nother mess, but kind of relevant. Like, I mean, against removal and counters, just, what order do you play your cards in? Which card in your hand do you care about resolving and having it stick around the most?
Right.
So, well, let's just go with, our standard example of affinity. And if you, Adrian, who have put in quite a lot of time with the deck, if you have, I don't know, let's say, turn 2, you have the option between Frogmite and Atog, and you think your opponent's on a black deck without blue, and you're kind of guessing they probably have some targeted or edict-based removal. Which one of those would you go for?
I play the Frogmite first.
Because?
I don't want my ATOG to die.
Exactly. And
Yeah, yeah,
and in this case, ATOG is more important because it represents a very, very large threat potentially. Um, and you know, sometimes you just got to run your stuff into your opponent's answers, and it's not fun, but it works.
yeah. But getting your Frogmite snagged rather than your ATOG is pretty big game. You know, you don't want your ATOG. That's what the Frogmites are there for. You know, they're there to eat something, maybe count up your affinity count. But at the end of the day, they're just a 2/2. So yeah, knowing when to trade your resources and hoping your opponent kills one of your lesser threats is really the part of the game.
Yeah. And earlier in the episode, we mentioned stuff like the bolt test, and we kind of alluded to it. Lightning Bolt is the most efficient, most widely played piece of red removal. So anything under 3 toughness kind of, always has this issue of it's boltable. And that doesn't mean the creature's unplayable, right? Like, dies to Lightning Bolt is not an utter condemnation so much as just be aware this creature is not going to live through a common piece of removal.
Yeah, just something to think about.
And especially with red, like knowing what red decks are playing in terms of removal is really, really useful sometimes, so that you can figure out like, okay, well, my opponent has this much red mana available next turn. Most people are playing only lightning bolts. They probably can't kill my Ulamog's Crusher, but
yeah.
but by the same token, if a bunch of the red decks are playing Flame Slash, on their turn, 2 Flame Slashes could kill your Ulamog's Crusher.
Right. Of course. But then maybe you're fine. You 2-for-1 them. I mean, you lost your threat, but I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting situation.
And there you bring it up, the 2-for-1.
Right.
We're definitely spiraling out of control, but I'm kind of going to let this ride because these are all kind of interrelated topics. You want to explain what 2-for-1 is, Adrian?
Yeah, 2-for-1 is when you make your opponent use 2 cards to get rid of 1 card, basically. So that's always good because it means that you're up a card and they're down a card and they didn't just, straight up trade.
Yeah, so there's often, you'll hear people referring to like 2-for-1s or 3-for-1s, or sometimes you'll hear 1-for-1 and 1-for-2, which is always, like the 1-for-2 is when you like your opponent's about to resolve something that's going to win them the game, and you're okay with spending 2 or more cards to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right.
And card advantage is a real thing, and very important to keep track of. If you're having to
That's
use
how some decks win the game. So
yeah. And for example, token decks prey upon this with single target removal. Like, edict effects become very bad against something like, say, Battle Screech, where you're basically paying 2 mana to undo a quarter of a card.
Right.
And that's not a good value. Like, even if you're innocent blooding, it's still not a good value. Like, you're just breaking parity with the fact that they spent 4 mana to get 4 tokens. So,
right.
Back to the topic at hand, playing around stuff. So let's just throw out some good things that people, probably should play around. We mentioned Counterspell.
It's probably the biggest one, honestly.
It's probably the biggest one because I am hard pressed to think of a blue deck that is even, on the tempo side of control things that doesn't just jam 4 of those in.
Yeah. It's just an incredible card.
And from there on in, like, a lot of the controlier decks, main deck will often have more kind of situational counter spells. Like, we've got Remove Soul, which is 1 in a blue, counter creature, and then Exclude, which is 2 in a blue, counter creature, draw a card. And both of those are very good cards. But being able to know the difference between, my opponent only has 2 mana up, they might have the Remove Soul, but at least this way I'm not like, getting zeroed for 1 by an exclude.
Right.
And what other things? Oh, we mentioned Hydroblast and Pyroblast, right? Those are very good to know about. And if you're playing a red deck and you're on a blue deck and you don't bring in your Hydroblasts, you're probably going to have a bad time.
Right. And so, then you got to, I don't know. I agree that playing around things is really good, but at some point you got to play Magic. If you run scared the whole game because you think your opponent has a counterspell, they're going to win the game. I don't know. It's a tough position. It's really like an in the moment style of call, like we're talking about here. Like all these examples we're giving, like these little one-off examples. But really, for me, it comes down to your gut feeling, and you have to consider the amount of cards in your opponent's hand, what mana they have up, and so on. At the end of the day, it could be they had a land and 2 blew up. You just don't know until you go for it, unless you're playing with a card like Ataxian Probe or Urza's classes. So, in the case of Kiln Fiend, tying it back to the deck we discussed today, they had the luxury of playing Ataxian Probe, so they know if they can go for it or not.
Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, that deck will, burn the probe turn 1 just to, see like, okay, I see 7 cards. I can probably guess what kind of deck my opponent's playing. And on top of that, I know what removal and answers they have for the foreseeable future.
Right.
But even still, unless you have the Gitaxian Probe in hand the turn that you want to swing for lethal, you still kind of have to go with like gut and information you've already gotten.
Right. Yeah, Magic's a heck of a game, y'all.
So I don't know. You've put in a lot of time with, say, Kuldotha Boros. What are some cards in that deck where you will play around a counterspell because they are just so good for you?
That deck is actually not a very good example because that deck is very, very bad at it's very good at playing around these things because, like, what if I play Battle Screech? It gets countered. Oh boy, I have 3 creatures out. You countered half the card. We talked a little about that earlier. Or it's like, I play Course Skyfisher and return Prism to my hand. Then the next turn they go Edict Skyfisher. Like, okay, well, I didn't really lose a card. Like I can just play my Prism again, and then I'll draw another card to replace the Skyfisher. Speaking about like card advantage. So so that deck is actually pretty resilient to these sorts of trades that we're talking about. I would say probably the biggest thing to play around is Gorilla Shaman, because there are some hands where you will just automatically lose to Gorilla Shaman if all you have are artifact lands, but that deck does play a surprising amount of non-artifact lands, so those hands you'll beat Gorilla Shaman. So it's kind of a toss-up, and I think those minute play-by-plays are a little bit, that deck's a little bit easier on the sort of concept we're talking about here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. So I guess, with Affinity, for example, there's some things where you, like that Gorilla Shaman turn 1, you're going to have a bad time.
There's a lot of cards to play around when you're playing Affinity. The biggest one I always do, the biggest thing about Affinity is knowing when you can go for Fling combo. Almost 99% of the time you'll be able to play around Daze because you just float all your mana. But like if you tap out in response to like your opponent's spell, that will almost always win you the game because they don't have any counter magic up. There's no Force of Will equivalent in our format. So really with that deck, it's knowing when to fling and when not to fling. Because counter magic will just ruin your day. And if your opponent is smart, they'll never tap out. So you can never truly go for it unless you see their hand somehow, or if they have no cards in their hand.
So I have a question. Is there ever a point where you consider it, correct to go for it, even though there's hidden information where you don't know 100% I'm going to win the game this turn?
If there are 4 counter spells in the bin, yeah, you might be able to go for it.
Or for example, if for some reason your opponent has lethal next turn, if you don't kill them this turn. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's a good one too. I would even do it in response to your opponent's lethal whatever. Like if they're attacking you, do it then. If you want to wait till the last possible moment to fling.
Yeah, I mean it is going to be the last moment if it goes through, but I don't know. I'm definitely like trying to think through, because I've put in a lot of time with a lot of different decks, but nowhere near the level of time that you've put in with single decks. So I definitely wanted to pick your brain on those sorts of things, because it really is one of those things where there's no hard and fast way to describe when you play around a card, because it 100% matters. I was talking with someone about this. No two games of Magic within probability are going to play out the same way. Like, it's absurdly unlikely.
That's one of the things we love about the game. So sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, it makes the game a better game, because like you've played similar games, but can you ever think of like a game where every game action was pretty much the same?
Nah.
Yeah. But it definitely is one of those things where, you know, pay attention. You know, if you're on MTG Goldfish looking at deck lists, look at, you know, the answers they're playing and the threats they're playing, and say to yourself, like, how would I answer these threats, and how do I answer these answers? And kind of being aware, you know, is the meta moving, you know, the black removal from, say, edict effects to something like Snuff Out or Doomblade, and how does that change how I interact with them? For example, you know, as soon as more targeted removal comes in, you know, maybe playing Boggles or Hexproof, whatever you want to call it, becomes more appealing, but other decks have a harder time, because now creatures can be taken out on a case-by-case basis, right?
Right. Yeah, metagaming. It's a thing you have to do.
Yeah, definitely. And at some point, we've got to talk about, like, on this show, in a future episode, we're going to talk about like flex slots within decks and what that all means. But you definitely want to be aware.
Like a pretty good episode.
Yeah, we've got a lot of topics. Once our respective lives calm down a little bit, we'll have some topics where we can go pretty deep on them, and, you know, get into the real nitty gritty of playing this format. So, anything else you want to add in on this topic?
No, let's shut that book.
What?
So now we can shut that book. My brain's picked.
Brain fully and completely picked. So
thought picker, which something magic joke.
Yeah. So we're a little shy of an hour here on this episode. We're about 50 minutes. Do you want to have anything to fill in these last 10, or
maybe I'll just talk real slow, just like Mike at F&M.
Oh,
I'm kidding. Zing. Okay, well, yeah, we can talk a little bit more about playing around.
Well,
stuff.
I was gonna say, like, just, is there anything, like, you've definitely told me in private, I don't know if we've discussed it on the show, that Pat's, that our LGS kind of stopped running Pauper events, and
we never stopped running Pauper events. People quit showing up to them.
All right. Well, you know, if you're listening and you're in the Austin area, go show up on Friday. But
yeah,
if they stop firing, what are you going to turn to?
I'm not going to play Magic ever again.
That's your solution? Just full tilt?
Just full tilt. Dude, I don't know, man. There's some other stores in the area that I guess might play a little bit of Pauper, but it's not the same.
That's fair.
So we're really just gonna work on trying to revitalize the Pat scene. I think what happened is it got to there was too much control in the meta, and I think that turns off some newer players. You know, if they get crushed by like a slow grindy deck, they don't want to play anymore. And so I don't know. It's just going to depend. My solution right now is honestly playing Modern, which I'm loath to do, but will do if that's the Magic that's happening. So, you know, I still got my all foil Modern Affinity deck. We had some good times together, me and that deck.
Did you actually finish foiling it, or is it still at like 90%?
Oh, it's still missing it's like 99%. I'm missing like 5 cards.
And now you can pick up all those inventions. But I've mainly just been drafting. I've been working on cube stuff, and, you know, all sorts of stuff to take up my time. I do deeply miss Pauper and F&M at Pat's. It's definitely much more enjoyable
Dude,
than.
even if you were here, we wouldn't be making. I'll be real with you. Like, you're not the reason
No,
that we're not.
I know, but just a little bit of a bummer to see something that I was there at the start for kind of taper off.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't think we should, drag this out past expiration date.
Yeah, wax too poetic here. I'll go ahead and take us out. Thanks for joining us today. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We like to remind you that if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated. They boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we're signing off for Color Commentary.